Coming up on Windows Weekly, I sit down with Mary Jo Foley and Paul Thurrott because Leo is at CES, and we start with a thoughtful commentary about the state of Windows. We take a look back at Microsoft as a cloud company, plus everything at CES that has to do with Windows, and a little bit of talk about Xbox because Paul's there. You know we got to. Stay tuned for that and so much more on Windows Weekly. Windows Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly, episode number 654, recorded January 8th, 2020. I hate products, she hates people. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 businesses count on Melissa for clean, reliable address data. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free. It's a $75 value at melissa.com/twit. Welcome back to Windows Weekly, which of course is a look at all things Microsoft, including Windows and Office and Xbox and sometimes Clippy and so much more. From two of the foremost Windows watchers in the world, it is Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Where are you reporting?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Where are you reporting to us from this year? Not a hotel room, I think.
No, that's my office. I'm eventually going to paint it and make it look prettier than it does right now. Also less yellow, although in real life it's kind of a beige, I guess.
A nice eggshell classic country white.
You're right. It's on the Manila spectrum.
As well as Mary Jo Foley of All About Microsoft, also reporting in from her office, I believe, with a nice classic off-white background.
Mine is also kind of yellow. So it's true to color there.
I bet our colors are actually identical, and that this is my camera being terrible. You know. Plus, I enjoy the prop books that she has back there. Like if you fold them over, they're just blank.
Yes.
You know, like empty. Like creating that library effect.
Sure they are.
Sure they are.
Well, welcome. Happy New Year to you both. And for those of you wondering why I am here, thank you. No, it's because Leo Laporte is at CES. Both him and our host, Aunt Pruitt, is there hanging out and reporting on all the stuff that's happening. So we are here in the studio in Petaluma, thankfully far away from CES and all of
our newly corporate branded studios.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Welcome to LastPass Studios. Are you secure? Right. So let's go ahead and kick things off as I once again celebrate and thank the gods that I don't have to be at CES getting conference cred. I was going to say neither are you. So when's the last time you both went to CES?
Many times.
What was the last year?
Yeah. Last time for me might have been like 10 years ago.
Okay.
I think it was 2 or 3 years ago.
So about 10 years ago.
But I mean, I used to go, but I went to Comdex as far back as the mid-90s. I used to go when you'd leave there with an incredibly heavy bag of paper because everyone would hand out pamphlets.
Oh, right. And
that seemed like a really important thing to bring home for some reason.
You had a playing card deck size of what are those called? Business cards. I almost forgot.
Yes.
Wow, I know, right?
That's embarrassing. Wow. Business cards.
Yeah, those things, it's like
it was terrible for me, though. My birthday was always during Comdex.
No.
Right.
The worst.
That's where you want to be, in Vegas, you know?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
See, so you both feel about Vegas how I feel about Vegas, I think. Maybe. I don't understand Vegas.
Yeah, yes. I mean, Mary Jo hates Vegas. But
I hate Vegas.
I not to speak for her, but I will say there are really good restaurants and there are really good shows. And if you can kind of put the blinders on to the rest of Vegas, like that stuff is actually kind of first class.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe.
Unless you live in New York and you can get those here.
Well, that's a good point.
Look, I live in a farm. Fine.
Yeah, you do.
Fine. To me, the hillbilly bumpkin, yes, Vegas is interesting. No, I don't like most of Vegas, but
The last time I was in Vegas, it was for a conference. I've only ever gone for a conference. And apparently I'm supposed to go when there's not a conference. I don't want to go. But the last time I was there, I was eating dinner while I quite literally watched someone urinate on the window outside of the restaurant I was eating in. And so it was just a full view of all the things that were going on.
To be fair, I've seen scenes like that in San Francisco.
Well, that's true. That's why we're in Howdy Doody Petaluma. Far away from
I don't know. Petaluma, I'm sure, is slightly more upscale. But I don't know.
Anyway.
I have to go to Vegas this year for a show.
Oh, no.
And I'm not looking forward to it per se, but
the food.
I think my wife will come and we'll go to a couple of shows and eat out a couple of times. And we'll just,
Do you like
try to ignore the strip clubs and the...
Do you go to like concerts or what, or more the Cirque du Soleil?
Like Cirque du Soleil type stuff. Yeah. Like I've actually seen a ton of those. They're great.
Well, maybe I'll have to do that. No, probably not. Let's start off.
But again,
go ahead.
Blinders.
Yes, exactly. You just keep them on. You don't worry about the things that are on the side, and you just those people that they click the cards. They're trying to hand you and they make that clicking sound with them.
Oh, I hate that. They're flicking them.
Yes.
The other, actually, I have really sensitive hearing, and the worst part of Vegas to me is just that in most hotels, you have to walk through the casino to get to and from your room, and it's that whole explosion of bing, 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 bing. That, and it hits at a particular frequency or something for me. No. It is just painful. I hate it.
And then there's still smoking in some of those places, right?
Oh yeah. Welcome to the 1960s again. All of a sudden,
right?
It's crazy.
Wow, Vegas. Let's rant about something else. I mean, have thoughtful commentary about something else.
This is what happens when Mary Jo does the notes first.
Paul Thurrott, what is your thoughtful commentary about the state of Windows as of 2020?
I called it a rant, and you know what? Rants don't have to be bad. Rants can be good.
Yes, like our rant about
Vegas.
Actually,
if I'm being honest with myself, it was kind of a rant, but
well, you don't want to spill the beans on the whole thing because this is a premium.
It's come and gone, but no, I just, so this week is CES. And one of the things we'll talk about in a little while is there's a bunch of dual screen devices or PCs that companies are showing off. There's a bunch of folding screen PCs that companies are showing off. And one of the issues I think we have as a community in the Microsoft world or the Windows community or whatever is this kind of irrational exuberance every time something new comes down the pike. Like we haven't been kicked between the legs repeatedly over the past decade. The PC industry is what it is. And what it is 2/3 the size it was in 2011. This is a market that has shrunk every year since 2011. Fewer PCs sold year over year, every year since 2011. That's the reality of this market. So when you look at things like Windows 10X or the dual folding screen devices that will run that system, the thing you got to keep in mind is this isn't going to be a second Renaissance era for the PC. This is an attempt by Microsoft and PC makers to stem the tide. It's to slow it as much as possible. There may be a couple of years, maybe, where it kind of plateaus, but I mean the long-term picture is decline. It just is. That's the state of that market. The world, the personal computing world has gone mobile and web services. I mean, that's reality. I love the PC. I say that as a defender of the PC. I love the PC. I routinely look at alternatives to the PC. I obviously look at the mobile-based stuff like the iPad Pro, whatever, Chromebooks. I always come back to the PC. I love the PC, but and I also like because of the move to mobile in particular, a lot of the superfluous stuff has moved off of the PC, and the PC has returned to its its true form as a productivity device. And so for people who Microsoft would describe as doers or people who are knowledge workers or creators of any kind, I mean, PCs are the ultimate tool. It's, as a writer, it's something I rely on every day. I love it. But we can't pretend that this is like something awesome is going to happen. You got to remember, Microsoft has no direct representation of Windows as a product on the senior leadership team of the CEO. This is not a priority for these people.
Can I interject on that one?
So, of course.
I read your story or your thought piece, as you like to call it.
Thought piece. Yep.
And you know what? I agree with a lot of it, but I feel like some of this is just the evolution of the industry and what can they do, right? So I feel like the way they're trying to keep Windows alive is by having the representation on the senior leadership team come from Microsoft 365. And that's okay. If you look at organizationally at Microsoft, that is where Windows is now, right?
Okay. By the way, you're right. But so the issue I have with that is that by reducing Windows to a component part of a broader, what is largely cloud services business, it's just never going to have the emphasis that it requires. You know, one thing I was thinking about this ahead of the show because the problem for Microsoft is that there's what they have to fall back on is not adjacent in any way to the PC space. So for Microsoft's broader, what I mean by that is cloud services, like that's the future for the company, right? So ultimately, they don't really care what devices people use as long as they're accessing their services. A company like Apple, which also had a traditional PC, but has a traditional PC business in the form of the Mac, gets a halo effect because their other devices and services can kind of work within that world, and the Mac becomes sort of more valuable as a result. You know, in the Microsoft world, Windows just kind of gets left behind. And part of it is absolutely the fact that the market has gone on and what can Microsoft do about this? I mean, this is something they knew as long ago as the early 2000s when they finally started coming up with that thing that was going to be Longhorn, and they realized, oh God, mobile's happening. Like we have nothing of interest to developers anymore. There's not going to be any new major apps happening on Windows. These things are going to happen elsewhere. So that's kind of the beginning of the churn. But again, you know, this is the business that houses Windows, not Microsoft 365, but Windows. Yeah. Because financially, they are not combined. Right. It represents 1/3 of their total revenues every quarter and every year. Still does. That's $11 billion per quarter, roughly. Windows is absolutely the biggest chunk of that. Yeah.
And if you're Amy Hood, the CFO of Microsoft, what you're looking at is, okay, I don't care what's happening right now. Like what's going to happen in a year, 10 years, right? So they're looking also at the profit margins of all their businesses. And that's where Windows is not one of the biggest chunks. It's going steadily down, right? So you have
it's hard to say because I don't break it down.
It's slowing anyway. The profit rate is slowing. Although last year it did have an unusually good couple quarters because of a variety of factors. But they know if they're going to keep their profit margins up, they have to do more with Office 365, Azure, all their cloud services, Dynamics even. I'm saying that begrudgingly because I feel like they're kind of all over the map with Dynamics, but I feel like they're just being realistic, right?
But ultimately, that's kind of the point of what I wrote and what I'm trying to say is that we as a community need to understand this reality. Like I've seen pieces about like how vibrant the PC industry is today, and it's like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. I mean, on the one hand, you can absolutely argue as you could any year, like you've never had a better choice of PCs than we have right now, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of spaghetti being thrown at the wall right now at CES about, will any of these form factors make any sense at all? The biggest changes that have come to the PC over the past decade or so, not that they originated in the past decade, but just the expansion of this stuff is, pen computing and multi-touch and so forth. I mean, ultimately haven't had that big of an effect on the PC space. Not really, right? I mean, nobody is, and I don't mean literally, but people turn to mobile devices to read, to watch movies, to be on Facebook, to do whatever. They don't typically use a PC for that stuff. By and large, unless you're as old as I am, I guess. But that's just that's just the reality of it. And when you look at 2020, there's a lot of uncertainty this year. We've got an insider program that is testing features in the fast ring that may or may not make it in some future version of Windows. We have no idea. Like that's a big change. There is the leadership issue I raised earlier. Whatever. That's just sort of my the guy that ran Windows used to be on the senior leadership team. Like this is not the case anymore. We just had a year of that, and we saw how poorly that went. I just feel, it's going to decline. There's no doubt about it, but it's something that should be managed better because it is still such an enormous business. And not to be completely cynical, but here we are. CES is drawing to a close. And let's spend the next 30 minutes talking about all of the major Microsoft CES announcements. Oh, wait, there aren't any. Like there aren't any. Even Apple was at CES.
Yeah.
Now,
but this isn't a Microsoft show, right? Like that's the other part of the equation.
But
Microsoft has very minor interest in consumers, despite anything that anybody says.
Okay, now that's coming from Mary Jo Foley, who also hates consumers. So
no, I like consumers.
It's hard to say if what you're saying is
no. She
biased.
hates all individuals, not just consumers.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So, but when you say that, what do you mean by that?
No, CES isn't a place you go if you're an enterprise cloud vendor.
Okay.
Right? That's not your show.
Sure.
And that's what Microsoft is first and foremost, is what you're saying.
Or at least what they would aspire to be. I mean, they've got some. They've got people at CES, right? Chris Caposella's at CES, and various people on the Windows team are at CES doing private meetings and meetings with OEMs because, all these new PCs are going to run 10x at some point, right?
Well, the real reason they're there and in the capacity they're in is the same reason they've been there in that capacity for several years, which is they have a little suite down in the bottom of a hotel. And if you're in the press, you can come down and you can go to a room and they have all their new devices and everything. And so the world's tech press and the bloggers and everybody are all in CES this week. So this is a chance for people who live wherever they live in the world to see some stuff hands-on because they might not have been able to go to the October event or whatever other events that Microsoft might have had. They're there. And so it's a place for for them to have that interaction, but they don't, there's no press releases, there's no announcements, they're sort of blogging
they're
about
just backing
the PCs
the
that their
plays.
partners. Yeah.
That makes sense. Now, so they are there in the capacity of giving people an opportunity to chat with them essentially, but there are a lot of PC makers who are there and who make devices that run Windows. So you're kind of saying here, Windows or Microsoft, I guess, is after one market and they're kind of letting these other vendors take care of consumers. I mean, then what about this Surface Book that I have here? Or Surface Laptop. I always say Surface Book, Surface Laptop.
So I feel like Microsoft and Apple are in the same place on that front, right? Like Apple's not there showing off MacBooks, right? Right. Because that's not the show for it. And they feel like Surface is enough of a compelling brand in and of itself that when they have an event to announce something, they have their own event. They don't do it at a show where it gets lost, basically.
Right. Yeah, this is not the place for doing that because they can afford to do it on their own and have the press come and want to be a part of it. So
exactly.
That makes sense.
Yep.
I mean, even when Microsoft was explicitly targeting consumers with specific products and services and things. I mean, they obviously have some stuff. They have home versions or consumer versions of Office 365 and OneDrive and all that. But even when that was a going concern, back when they would have had Media Center or Zune or any of that stuff, the enterprise has always been basically 2/3 of their business. It's probably a much bigger chunk today. And that I think that trend does continue. That's not like wish fulfillment. I mean, I think that is that's the trend for sure.
Yep. I don't know. When I read your post, two things came across my mind. One was, man, did Paul have a bad holiday, and is that why?
No, he dislocated his shoulder.
I know, right? No, but then the other thought was, you know what? If I were writing this post, you have a lot of glass half full things in this post that you just don't present that way, right?
Okay.
I feel like
what are some
when you
glass
talked
half
about
fulls? Yeah.
No, you talk about like Windows as a service, right? And so if you think about, okay, there are still a lot of problems with how Microsoft is servicing Windows 10. There are, definitely. But if you look at the past year, they fixed some of those, right? And that's good.
Did they?
Yeah.
I don't think they fixed any of them.
Well, okay, so the second feature update of Windows 10 last year was a cumulative update, basically.
Yeah, so they didn't fix anything. They just, that's like saying, look, we can't win at volleyball. We're going to play another game. And then we're going to say we won at volleyball. I mean, they didn't release.
I feel like they could say they won, but if you ask IT pros, they would say, yeah, that was a win.
Right, but they didn't. But they changed the game. I mean, I guess what I'm saying, like, look, if they came out and said, look, we've learned. We can't do two of these feature update things.
They'll never admit they made a mistake.
I know, but if they just came out and said, "Look, we heard feedback from our users and they love this. Now we're gonna. We thought the two things was good, but we're gonna do this other thing now." That would absolutely be a win. I'd be all over that, but they don't say that. They don't say that. I will say I should never admit to this, but my original headline for this article was "Pray."
Oh, jeez.
And like the Wired headline for Apple in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I
talked
to
the
Brad.
Candle there?
Yeah, I did. That was the candle. So I talked to Brad and I said, look, I'm nervous. This is a little too negative. What do you think about this? And he was like, ew. So I changed the headline to something innocuous. And then I kind of read through it. And the thing you have to understand is like, I don't have an agenda. Like I don't wake up in the morning. I'm like, oh, I'm going to skewer my windows, like I just, the writing of it just happened. And I was like, man, this is, I didn't wake up like, Windows is doomed. I don't think like that. Like that wasn't my point, but you see these, like CES is happening, and like CES is like this time of great stupidity of noise, just in the industry. And it's like, guys, we need to be realistic about what's really happening here. Too many people who were burned by Windows Phone or HoloLens or Cortana or whatever, Zune, going back, Windows Media Center, are like, oh, Windows 10X. Yeah, now we got it. This is going to be the one. It's like, guys, come on. Really? Windows 10S? Seriously, Windows RT? I mean, really? You think this is going to be the one? This suddenly, I don't know. I have a knee-jerk reaction to that kind of stuff. Apparently, the knee-jerk lasts for about 2,000 words, but it's a sustained knee-jerk.
I don't know. I just, when I read through it, I kept saying, okay, he made this point, but you know what I would have said? Like, okay, I give another example, perhaps?
Well, you're more reasonable than I am, though.
Yes, let's hear another example.
So Azure Sphere, which is based on a version of Linux that Microsoft wrote to run on a microcontroller. You were like, yeah, Linux. I know when you see that word, you see red. But you know what I see? I see a company that's being practical.
So, by the way, my point with that was, by the way, I couldn't care less that this thing runs Linux. But the problem is this is part of a continuing problem that Microsoft has had. You got to remember, like when Windows Phone launched in 2011, it was this Windows CE based thing, a Silverlight programming model. It was whatever it was. They pushed it out into the market, half realized. And then they had to change that platform twice more. And then they went to combine it into this one Windows thing. And they sold developers in this dream that you're going to be able to write one app that can target phone and PC and tablet and Surface Hub and HoloLens and Xbox and IoT devices and whatever. And the reality, like that sounds awesome. But the reality is that's completely impractical. And this, instead of like adopting Linux when they should have, they pushed Windows as an IoT. They're still pushing it as an IoT solution, but they pushed Windows as their only IoT solution for so long. And I think just not misleading developers, but just going down this path where everything had to be contorted to work, not just to be Windows, but to be within this programming model. For some reason. Right. So yeah, they are absolutely doing the right thing now.
I need to dig in on that.
It happened way too late.
So I am super into IoT, and I'm curious, when you say IoT, Windows is an IoT solution, what are the IoT devices that Windows is supposedly trying to solve for?
Yeah, so it's a range, right? So as far as like what devices run like some IoT version of Windows, it's devices like Arduino or Raspberry Pi, or, I'm not really familiar with this world. It's basically the embedded world. So
gotcha.
It's not a device on which you bring up a Windows desktop and run applications. They're basically, it's kind of a single app kind of scenario. You're writing a smart display that's going to be in a store maybe, or some kind of a light switching thing in a retail situation or whatever, like an industrial IoT type solution.
Yeah. So they have a thing called Windows IoT Core that runs on a lot of those devices, right? But now, like Paul is saying in his piece and saying here on the show, they realized it doesn't always make sense to try to scale Windows down to go into all those devices. So instead, they look at, okay, where can we play? We can do the services that connect to IoT devices, right? And that's what they're doing with Azure IoT.
It's in keeping with the broader company strategy, which, by the way, absolutely does make sense.
And by the way, the thing you forgot in your story when you talked about Azure Sphere,
yes,
they also last year bought the biggest real-time operating system vendor, Express Logic, right? So I feel like they're just being practical.
Are you sure they're the biggest real-time operating system?
One of the biggest, if not the biggest. Yep.
Well, I would. Okay.
Yep.
Qualifiers. They
have a product called ThreadX RTOS, real-time operating system, and Microsoft bought them, and they're working with that platform now too in terms of supporting it with their own services. Again, what I like about the Microsoft of today is it's practical instead of just trying to ram Windows down everybody's throat when it doesn't make sense.
So I 100% agree with that. But this piece was focused on Windows specifically, and like I said, the irrational exuberance I see around this thing that Microsoft continues to talk about like it's only for dual screen devices, when we all know and we have seen internal documentation stating this thing is in fact a user experience for traditional PC form factors as well. That's something that will come in the future. Yeah. I guess I was just trying to position the reality of Windows today as a reminder for people who still, unfortunately, when you think about like the type of person who would come to my site, the type of person who would watch this podcast is by definition a tech enthusiast, a Windows or Microsoft fan or whatever. And I continue to see a lot of people who just are really pushing back against this notion that this stuff is increasingly irrelevant. And I don't mean all of it. I mean, just this notion that Windows is everything. It's not everything. It's this wonderful thing that works really well in this specific, type of product. Yeah. And
agree.
I mean, really well.
No, I know. It is hard. Like when people write to you, and which I'm sure you get more of this than I do. I'm still using Windows Phone. I'm not going to give up on it. It's still the best phone platform. And it's like, guys, you're going to have to give up on it. It's not supported anymore, right?
I don't know why people feel the need to kind of promote this. Like I am living in the past.
Yeah,
I have a grass
very
hut.
Proud. Yeah, very proud of living in the past.
You try to let them down easy and say, I loved it too, but it's a different era now. And they're like, you know what? So when Surface Neo comes out, and Surface Duo, I'm all in on these
everything's going to
right?
happen.
Oh my God.
I know, and I'm like, so it's not the same thing, right? This is not the same device that you're thinking it is, and it's probably going to be very expensive, the phone one.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts.
It's also technically not particularly interesting. I mean, in the wake of folding display devices, Microsoft announces a device that has two screens. Like it's just a mechanical hinge, metal bezels, whatever. I mean, it's more practical, like, in keeping with what you were saying earlier, for sure. It's going to be easier to bring to market. It will be more reliable, absolutely, in the beginning. The dual screen stuff freaks me out. I feel like it's a reaction to the rest of the industry, and it's like, look, all the cool kids are doing it. We're going to have to do it too.
Really?
And I keep using this example.
It's interesting though that you feel that way, because Microsoft.
Well, it's happening, right? But will it be successful? Remember, I've used this on, I said this on First Ring Daily already this week, so I apologize if you listen to both shows. But, Steve Jobs, when he introduced the iPad, he came up and he said, look, we have this thing called a phone and we have this thing called a laptop, and we wondered if there was room in the middle for something else. And if there is, it has to do things better than both of those devices. And he had a list of 10, maybe more items where he said, this is what we think the iPad does better. It was email, browsing, whatever. I don't remember the list. I don't know. I don't agree with most of it. It doesn't matter. There was a rationale behind it. There is no rationale for a dual screen device that makes any sense at all that I've ever heard. And if you go back and watch what Panos Panay said at that announcement, he said nonsense. He said
that line in the middle. It's going to make you more productive. When
there's two screens, your creativity explodes. However you said it. No, that's not what studies show. Studies consistently show that multiple screens lead to distraction, which leads to less productivity. And this is well understood.
Studies show if you have two displays, you can learn to play the piano, and one day you will be on the stage because your father insists on making you play piano for all of the Windows watchers in the world.
Yeah, that's a problem on a different scale. But I guess I've never heard a good rationale for it.
I know.
And also, when you come up with a platform like that, think about not that it went very well, but in 2003 when they announced Longhorn, they were like, all right, here's the first developer bits. This is what we're working on. Here's what we're calling everything. Let's get some feedback and we'll get this thing going. Here's Windows 10X. It's coming out next year. If you're interested, drop us an email and we'll, maybe we'll get back to you. That's the developer story. What?
Now,
it's crazy.
What was the product that Windows or Microsoft had created a long time ago as a concept where they were before?
Courier.
Yeah, Courier. So they kind of were doing that before other people were doing these foldable dual screen display devices.
It's a little unfair to say. I mean, I've heard people from Microsoft say, yeah, we were working on something like the iPhone. We just never showed anybody. And it's like, guys, that's disingenuous. Anyone can make a concept prototype, and that thing didn't come to market for very good reasons at the time. It just
was going to be so expensive, right? Two panes of glass.
No, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it didn't make any sense.
I think their best move was not bringing it.
I just wonder if it was less, I feel like there are a lot of companies out there who right now are reactionary in creating dual screen devices, but I want to give Microsoft a little bit of credit given that they were thinking about dual screen devices for a long time and are now bringing it to, market. But
you're assuming that Microsoft is some collective entity that has a consciousness that spans all of the employees that have ever worked there. The people who thought about Courier have been gone from Microsoft for 10 years. There is no continuation of, it's just, I'm just saying, that's, whatever. When Apple came up with those kind of Apple things in Mac OS 10, the dashboard stuff or whatever it was called, it was like, okay, this is silly. This obviously came from mobile. There, blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, no, the first version of Mac OS had these little sort of apps that, it couldn't multitask, but these little apps could multitask. And so it's like a continuation of that work. No, it isn't. It had nothing to do with it. Right. Like the fact that a company named Apple came up with something in 1983 and then a company named Apple came up with something in 2005 had nothing to do with each other. Nothing.
Especially because one was the Beatles and the other was a tech company.
Yeah.
Different Apple.
Mary Jo Foley, you took a look back at the decade that Microsoft became a cloud company, the decade that they started to agree with you that consumers don't matter.
Come on, man.
No wonder you disagree with me so much. You love this decade.
Tell us about this.
Actually, I went back because I was thinking a lot of people call the 2010s Microsoft's decade when they became a cloud company, but that's not actually true. They became a cloud company before that. And if you look way back at where the origins of their cloud competency came, it was like in 2007, like mid-2000s when they had Exchange Online. Then they had this thing called BPOS, which was the predecessor to Office 365. So they were doing cloud stuff in the decade before our past decade, quite a bit, kind of laying the foundations. But I wanted to see what did they actually do in the 2010s. So I went back and looked, and they did a lot, right? Yeah. I mean, this is a decade when Azure became generally available, when they launched Linux on Azure, when they launched Azure Stack, when they launched Microsoft 365. So this was a huge decade for them in the cloud. But I have to say, when I did the timeline and wrote this post up, I also included some of the information about how they were very successful in getting people to take their eye off Windows and look at the cloud instead, even though, as Paul mentioned, Windows is still a third of their revenues. So they did all these very tangible things to build their cloud business in the last decade, but they also did some really interesting intangible things in terms of getting Wall Street and the press and many customers to start seeing them as the cloud company, even though they weren't at the start of the decade really the cloud company. They created this category we talk about on Windows Weekly a lot called the commercial cloud. That's not even a real thing. They just took all their different cloud products, munched them together, and said, "Here's this category, and we're going to get $20 billion run rate by 2018 for this, and that's our goal, right?" So they kept adding more things into the bucket. So yeah, they actually hit the goal in 2017 for the $20 billion annual run rate. But But they did a lot of smart kind of manipulative things to make people think of them as the cloud company in this decade. I'd say as much of that almost as they did with real tangible services that they launched in the cloud in the decade.
You know what backs that up too? Is some of the best minds at Microsoft moved from other parts of the company to the cloud businesses in this time frame.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things, and not just like there are obviously people like Mark Russinovich, who's just a genius, architectural guy, but there's also some of the best high profile employees, in the company are working in that space now. It's really, really interesting to see that transition.
It is definitely. I have to say though, I was surprised. My article was not like yours, very outwardly negative, but I felt like it had a lot of negativity in it, in that I was questioning how they got people to take their eye off Windows. Yet many people from Microsoft retweeted this article, and I was like, I don't think you guys quite got the second half of my point, which was they were just as good at manipulating views as they were at building the cloud.
Yeah, I think
maybe I should have said
the interesting thing about the cloud, though, is that there is an established kind of dominant player there.
Yes.
And this is kind of new for Microsoft. I mean, they clearly have had great success. Mm-hmm. There's clearly lots of room for growth.
Definitely.
But I'm trying to think of other examples where they were successful entering a market that was dominated by other companies. And of course, most of the things I can think of are kind of consumer related. What's that?
What about Sony, right? Like Sony owning the game console market and then Microsoft coming in with Xbox? No?
And failing. They've come in last place every generation.
Right. But
yeah.
I mean,
that's what I mean. Like
when they first came in, though, people were just like, "Oh, give up, Microsoft! You're never going to have a presence in gaming at all." Right?
Yeah. Well, ironically, in that case, the cloud has positioned Microsoft for future success in gaming, so that's worked out really well. But a lot of their consumer initiatives kind of just petered out. This is obviously not the consumer space. You'd almost have to go back to the early '90s, I guess, when they started going after the WordPerfects and Lotuses of the world. I mean, they obviously put a lot of those companies out of business, essentially, or Netscape maybe might be the most recent example.
Yeah, you could say when they came into the market with SQL Server initially, everybody called SQL Server a toy, right? And they were like, "Oh, you can't do anything compared to like what IBM and Oracle and other database vendors are doing." And then now they are a very credible player in databases.
Yeah, and actually SQL is a great story because the first, 4 major versions of it were based on Sybase. It wasn't even their own product. Right. And when SQL Server really took off, it's when Microsoft rewrote it by themselves from scratch. As an actual Microsoft product.
Right. Yep. And now they've got Cosmos DB and they've got Azure SQL. They've got all this other stuff they've done with databases and data lakes. I have to throw that word in there. Data lakes and
worst drink of 2020.
Just stick to the rivers,
big
and the
data,
lakes
products, services, and strategies. So there's an example of when they set their mind to doing something, even if they're established players, they do it.
Well, folks, we have loads more to talk about. But before we get there, I do want to take a
But we're out
break.
of time.
But we're out of time, so we're going away.
See you next week.
I do want to take a quick break to tell you about the leader in address verification. That is Melissa. Every address is covered from Adelaide, Australia, to Zipaquirá, Colombia, and everywhere in between. We all know there's nothing good about bad data. It costs money, it hurts sales, and, it decreases customer satisfaction. If bad addresses, duplicate records, and bouncing emails are hurting your business, isn't it time to come clean with Melissa? Delta Faucet, Z1 Motorsports, and Car2Go use Melissa, and you should too. Delta Faucet was able to improve their call center processes with global address auto-completion. Melissa was able to reduce the fraudulent e-commerce transactions for Z1 Motorsports by 90%. Melissa provides a full spectrum of data quality protection for your customer data. You can verify postal addresses, mobile numbers, and email addresses, and of course, update the addresses of customers that have moved and eliminate duplicate records, plus gain additional customer insight into your data with Melissa's analytics. You You can easily build address verification and customer data validation into your custom application using Melissa's APIs, CRM cloud connectors, and e-commerce plugins, or upload your customer file for a quick data cleanse. That's fantastic. So no matter how you want to go about cleaning your data, Melissa has a way to do that. If you just want to add on a little bit there with the applications you already have in place, then it can do that. Or if you just want to pop up some files and watch Melissa do its work, you can do that as well. Melissa is serious, by the way, about securely managing that data. They continually undergo independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. That's SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Mailers spend about $20 billion, that's billion with a B, annually in undeliverable mail. Don't lose customers and don't lose cash. Make every address count. Bad data happens to good companies. That's why 10,000 organizations worldwide trust Melissa to get their customer data clean and accurate. Get started today with 25,000 records cleaned for free. That's a $75 value at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/TWIT. Or call 1-800-MELISSA, MELISSA, to find out more. Our thanks to Melissa for sponsoring this week's episode of Windows Weekly. And let's see what's next. Speaking of CES, there are new Windows 10 PCs at CES. And as we mentioned, there are some foldable devices and some dual screen devices. But we're not seeing Windows 10X, which is not 1010 or X10 or anything else. It is Windows 10X. So what's going on? What are you excited at all about anything that's at CES? I don't know.
But
you're not really?
No, not really. Well, look, in keeping with this is where the PC industry is. There are incredible PCs out in the world today, and the stuff we're seeing at the show for the most part is, on the evolutionary side for sure. I do find it interesting that companies are announcing dual and folding screen PCs that are running Windows 10 Pro and not Windows 10X. Maybe this is just speculation on my part based on the fact that I feel like it's obvious, but it seems to me that the Windows 10 user experience, whatever that interface is that they provide for that, is something that could and should come to mainstream versions of Windows 10 as well. In particular, I was one of the reasons I thought about this was there was a Lenovo picture of I guess it was a folding screen laptop that had it was obviously Windows 10X on it, but they said this thing's going to run Windows 10 Pro. I was like, well, that's interesting.
But then they said it'll run 10X when that's available.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see a lot of that as well, where you can get the same device and choose which system you want to get or whatever. But I'd like to see. I don't see why that couldn't be an option on any consumer PC. It's just a simpler interface is probably something a lot of people would enjoy, and would obviously lead to the great renaissance of the PC era.
Obviously, that guy. You can't win with Paul.
So Mary Jo Foley, we can win with you. What are you excited about at CES?
I thought that ThinkPad X1 Fold looked pretty cool. Although I was watching their sizzle video for that thing, and it was showing how you can open it all the way and the hinge and everything. And I'm like, I'm sure they test that a million times, opening and closing that hinge with machines and everything, but it just seems kind of flimsy.
Yeah.
Oh,
right?
I'm looking at it now.
It is an early adopter thing. I mean, look, folding screens are the future. I think, and by the way, I think that's the thing we got to keep in mind with all this stuff, whether it's a dual screen display or a folding screen display, whatever. This technology will eventually work, right? And it will be great. It's not going to happen this year or next year or whatever, but and we'll see. And that may change form factors and all that kind of stuff. But, the PC market has been experimenting with this stuff for a long time. I mean, Mary Jo probably remembers at WinHec in 2004 or 5 or whatever it was, Asus was showing off this display on the back of a laptop lid. And you got to remember this is before smartphones, but maybe you remember the name of that stuff. I don't remember. They never did it. But
what was that called? Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was.
It was like this little mini window on your screen, right?
It was for notifications.
Yeah.
So if you're carrying around your laptop and you got an email or whatever it was, you could see that it happened. You couldn't read it or anything, but you could see that it happened because we didn't have phones, right? So, back in the day, and this actually isn't that long ago, but people kind of forget about this. I experienced this at Comdex or CES a long, long time ago. I'd go to a meeting, and I had the meeting, and then I'd have to figure out where the next meeting was. So I'd open up my laptop. Slowly it would boot up because back then, power management was terrible. It wasn't you could leave the thing running. It wasn't sleeping. You had to turn it off.
No auto.
Took forever to boot up, load Outlook or whatever. Look, see where it was. Okay, close the whole thing down. Go to the place you thought it was, and you're like, oh wait, what was it? Was it room 14 or 4? Like, and then you'd open the thing up. So back then, like that, unless you were printing it out, I guess, like that would that seemed like it would have been useful. But of course, then the mobile thing happened, and now no one cares about that stuff anymore. But here we are again. We get e-ink screens on the outside of displays. These folding displays. Apple has a touch bar, obviously, on some of its MacBook Pro, most of its MacBook Pros these days. I don't know if it's Asus or doesn't matter who it was, but someone has like a giant touch screen that's above the keyboard on the deck of a laptop, and it's like could be interesting. Is this something? I don't know. It just all seems kind of.
Wait. What we haven't talked about on the show, but we've both been playing around with them, is the HP Elite Dragonfly Ultrabooks, right? And they announced at CES some additional new features coming to those. I think they said 5G or LTE or something, and then
5G later in the year.
Right.
The privacy screen, and then the tile integration.
The tile integration.
What is tile integration?
So if you're familiar with the tile fobs, it's like a Bluetooth-based device that helps you locate like your keys. You attach one to your keychain, whatever.
Yeah.
And they have a partnership with Tile. They're trying it in this first model now, and they'll probably expand it over time to other devices. And you kind of hear that, and you're like, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And it will obviously lead to the next great PC renaissance.
These are pretty pricey. These HP. Oh my God, HP. Let's just move on from that. HP Elite. So Dragonflies are kind of pricey.
These EliteBook Dragonflies. Elite Dragonflies. When I was worried that when I got the review unit, I was going to feel bad that I bought the Surface Laptop 3 because I thought this was going to be my perfect device. And then after I used it for a month, I was like, nope, it's not my perfect device.
Now, that is because
she hates
I don't
HP.
like the plastic.
Wait, it's magnesium.
I don't like
plastic. It's magnesium. It's the same.
It feels like cheap plastic. It does.
All right. So every Surface PC except the one that you own is based on magnesium.
I know.
And
but they don't feel like that. I
agree that there's kind of a plastic feel to it, but what it reminds me of is the polycarbonate that Lumia phones used to be built out of, the early ones, and then like the Nexus 3A line that came out last spring is polycarbonate, and I think it's I like it. It's lightweight, but it's durable. I like the way it feels.
Oh, it's how the Kindle feels. I know that.
Yeah,
feeling.
it's got a kind of. I like the feel. I mean, I know magnesium and polycarbonate are not the same thing, but to me they have a similar look and feel to them.
Yeah.
I can't believe I am saying this, but I was a 16:9 aspect ratio person my entire life. And then now that I've been using the Laptop 3, I can't get away from the new aspect ratio and go back to 16:9.
I don't usually ask for this kind of comeuppance, but I pushed this for years. You pushed back.
Did.
It's true.
You did.
It's true.
I know. I kept saying, I hate, what's the Surface Laptop? 3.2?
3x2, yeah.
Yeah. I used to hate it. I felt like it was too information dense, and now I'm like, what's this little mini screen on this thing?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, 16:9 was designed for entertainment. It's for movies. It's for, TV sets, that kind of thing. And in the early 2000s, right, it was like the second or maybe the third gen of Media Center was when this happened. PC screens started going 16:9.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation about this with Lenovo. They fought against this for a long time. It was 4x3 is what they had. It was like the early ThinkPads were 4x3, which is essentially the same form factor as 3x2. But screens started going wide, so they stuck with 16:10 as long as they could, and then eventually, 16:9 is the norm. I mean, it's so normal now that it's very expensive not to use a 16:9 display as a PC maker.
Yeah.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
Now, I'm looking at, so the one thing that I do like about this Elite Dragonfly Transformer 7 is that I like that it can fold back and be a full on.
Yeah.
I wish that there was more to do with this display, since it is touch sensitive. It would be cool if it worked.
It is. Yeah, it's weird to me that the Surface laptop doesn't offer at least lay flat.
Lay flat, yeah.
Which is actually kind of common now in other PCs. But I think that of all the convertible type form factors, the type that HP uses, that what they call the X360 hinge, makes the most sense to me, because most of the time, most people are going to want to use it as a traditional laptop. But in the off chance you want to pull out a pen or just flip it over and use it like a tablet, you get that. And obviously in those form factors, it's a little bulkier than a traditional tablet or whatever. But I think it speaks to the normal use case, for most people. So I think it's the right way to do it.
Yep.
And also the other trend there, because the Elite Dragonfly is like an offshoot of their EliteBook line. And the other laptop, Mary Jo, that you were using this past year, which is the EliteBook 1030, is essentially that same exact laptop, but in aluminum, right? So it's a little, it's heavier, it's thicker, whatever. It's traditional kind of a business device. In addition to lightening it with magnesium, they're also shrinking down the bezels, and it's fairly dramatic. Like compared to the 1030 or the consumer version, which is like a Spectre X360 13, they've actually cut like almost an inch off the height of the thing. So they haven't fixed the display ratio.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, but it's amazing. It's amazing. I actually
it's terrible. It's horrible.
How can it be both amazing and terrible?
Hold on. But so I know why you think it's terrible. I can't believe how much you focus on this. It's beautiful. But
it's a huge deal.
It is a huge well, okay, but just go ahead and say it. You might as well just get to the
so they did shrink down the dimensions, so it's much squattier now. So try using that on your lap.
It's not lappable. I should have guessed.
Nope. It is lappable, but man, every second I'm grabbing onto it so it doesn't fall off my lap, and I'm like, okay, the whole audience for this device are mobile professionals. Many times they are not at a desk; they are on the road. You're on your lap when you're typing on the road, and it's just very chippy.
Okay, so granted, I have gorilla hands, and I'm sure they're very heavy, but by virtue of my wrists leaning on the wrist rest,
it doesn't.
I am preventing any bobbling of this thing, right? Because I'm holding it down, not forcibly, but just by typing on it. I mean, you've seen me type. It's like an attack in World War I. It's, it's a violent thing, but
it's not pretty.
But it is just the fact that my hands are on the wrist rest is what prevents it from, not that it would normally fly off the back or whatever, but
I feel like this laptop, for how expensive it is, and also I'm not getting anywhere near the battery life that it professes to get. I just feel like I'm very happy I bought the Surface laptop, and I'm very, very surprised that I did not love this machine. So by the way,
one of the big benefits from this is not the reason they do it, but when you think about a 3x2 display and how that makes it more of a kind of a square form factor, right, and not like a hyper small rectangle, because again, of the height of the screen. You have more room for battery. Right. So, I mean, actually, it's going to be a little heavier. I mean, one of the nice things about the Elite Dragonfly is that you can get a version with even a smaller battery. I think it's only 2.2 pounds. That's crazy for a 13-inch laptop. Totally. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, there are things I really did like that they were trying to do with this, and I love the blue color. I really like the idea of it being portable and easier to carry, but it just wasn't there for me.
I wonder why they don't use polycarbonate in laptop bodies. One of the nice things about polycarbonate is that the color is actually in the material. It's not coating or painting. Yeah. So the problem with aluminum or with magnesium is that if it's a color, you could scratch it with a key or something, and you would see the silver natural color underneath because it's just coated with a color. Mm-hmm. But when you use polycarbonate, you can infuse the material with the color. So if you scratch it, there'll still be a scratch, but that color is still in there. It's like the color is kind of through and through.
I wonder why they don't do that then.
Maybe because it feels like plastic.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. I mean,
oh man,
I certainly prefer my aluminum to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, like I said, last year and this year, well, I'll just say last year. Last year was a huge number of surprises to me about my preferences on devices. I never thought I'd like the laptop 3 as much as I did. And I really thought I was going to love this.
I never saw that coming.
Me neither. I totally didn't. And now I just love it. So, yeah.
That's amazing.
In fact, I was at a meeting last night. Wait till you guys hear this. I was at a meeting last night and the guy next to me goes, "Is that a Surface Laptop 3? I'm like, "It is." And he's like, "Oh, can I hold it?" "Yeah, okay, here." Wow. It's like one of those devices people are like, "Woo." And then I go to him, "What do you have?" And he goes, "I have a Surface Pro X."
What?
I know.
You saw a person out in the world with a Surface Pro X?
Wow. Yeah.
Did he escape from an insane asylum? What happened there?
No. Oh, he's a business guy in New York. And I was like, "You bought a Pro X?" And he goes, "I love it. It's fantastic." I was like, wow. Huh.
Oh, neat. Did he have the pen and all that? Yeah,
he's like, "I love the pen and the way the pen sits in the little holder." And I was like, wow.
I've been waiting for a computer that uses a carpenter pencil. It's kind of a weird. All right.
It is a weird.
One of our producers here bought a Surface Pro X, and I just want to say 10, but Surface Pro X.
Yeah,
and I
know it's awful.
I liked it. I liked the feel.
Oh, it's a beautiful machine. It's a beautiful machine.
It really is.
Yeah, it just has it's the thing you were talking about where you can't install things on it that you want to install on it.
It's ARM. Yeah, and that's that final mile problem. That maybe they'll solve.
He said it reminds me of a Chromebook in a good way, and I was like, that's a good way to look at it.
What is a good way for a Chromebook? What does that mean?
Paul, you beat me to it.
Just that you've got some limitations, but you're
when do you say
okay
that and mean it in a complimentary fashion? I'm
Come
curious.
On,
it's like you're a handsome woman. Huh? Like wait a minute. What was that?
Dear Grandma, you remind me of a Chromebook in a good way.
Yeah, boy.
Excuse me. All right, let's let Paul tell us about gaming PCs at CES.
What? Is that in the notes?
It's in the notes.
Oh, how did that get in there?
I just threw in the link to like all the different things that are on the Microsoft site, all these different things people announced.
Alienware satellite or something like that. No, UFO, I think is what it's called.
There are a lot of gaming PCs, right? Gaming laptops, gaming PCs.
As it should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, I was interested to see that Microsoft also had a post about commercial PCs that were being introduced at CES, which is a little more unusual in a way, other than the fact that it actually does happen every year. The ThinkPads, Dragonfly, et cetera. But
so now this is not necessarily. I don't know what it runs. The Alienware UFO, but I think this is kind of cool. It's a concept right now, but essentially it's a more powerful Nintendo Switch.
Jeez.
God, here we go again. It's a complimentary Chromebook. No, it's a way more powerful Nintendo Switch because you can use it as its own portable device, or you can connect it to a display and it powers the display, which I think is kind of a neat idea that Alienware is toying around with.
Right.
Now,
I don't know. It seems like PC gaming, aside from being mostly keyboard and mouse based, of course, the big transition there is I think controllers are becoming more common. And you could have done this years ago if you wanted to, but there are a lot of PC games you can play with a controller, and you could use a Surface form factor device. Those things are kind of nice because they have a kickstand, so you can kind of be away from it wirelessly, hopefully. And that's possible, but it seems like in the gaming PC space, though, you need something a little more powerful.
Isn't the goal, though, to get to a place where I can use my Surface Laptop 3 or my iPhone 10s to play whatever game I want to because it's all in the cloud? So
and that's going to be that's a subscription service kind of a thing, game streaming, hardware agnostic, whatever. This is the dream, but it reminds me of those Microsoft Office concept videos back in the day where someone would, in the course of one afternoon, use every single Office tool to pull the perfect presentation together and, get the raise at work or whatever. But these days it's like you're waiting for the school bus and you're playing on your Xbox and the big TV, and the school bus arrives and you jump on, and then you're playing on your phone, and then school's over and you're playing on a laptop or something. And it's like, some people will definitely do that, but I think it's more likely that most people who use these eventual game streaming services will probably stick to a device, for the duration. It is cool that you can choose the device, right? And that's very individualistic. Because I have middle-aged eyes, I can't read an Xbox display on a phone. It's just too small.
Right.
The text is like the tiny little status text around the shooter I'm playing or whatever. I can't even understand it.
Did that say Mary Jo Foley just sniped me?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yes, it did.
And then I guess other than that, Mary Jo, you touched on the fact that Ericsson is building its connected vehicle cloud on Microsoft's connected vehicle platform.
Yeah. If that's not confusing enough, your connected vehicle cloud is on my connected vehicle cloud. Right?
What is that? Those Reese's commercials where it's peanut butter and chocolate coming together.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it's makes
so I just threw this into the notes because Amazon did a lot of connected cloud kind of announcements and car announcements at CES, and Microsoft did this one with Ericsson, where Ericsson committed to using Microsoft's underlying connected vehicle platform to host their services for their cars on top, for their customers' cars. So it brings up something we started the show with, which is in the old days, Microsoft tried to put Windows everywhere, even in your car, right? Remember Windows embedded in Windows Automotive in cars? They decided quickly, as did the car vendors and customers, that was a terrible idea. And instead, what they do now is they have this connected vehicle platform, which is they try to connect cars up to different cloud services from Microsoft. So, things that you can do for preventive maintenance, but also even things like Office 365 and Teams for people hopefully not driving, but in the back seat, who they can be interacting with Teams, or maybe they can be doing it just through their voice. They could be interacting with Teams, and you'd be connected to Teams through the Microsoft Connected Vehicle platform. I've also heard them talking about xCloud, the streaming game service, being one of the services that you could connect into your cloud.
Playing in the car or something like that. I also like the idea of, I see you're coming to a stoplight and would like to brake your car. Here's how I can help.
Yeah, that's what we need. Yes. That looks like you're trying to kidnap somebody.
Yeah.
Would you like me to lock the back doors?
Would you like me to disable that trunk pull?
Yes, thank you, Clippy.
Clippy car. Cloud car Clippy.
Car. The Clippy car. That's what we all need.
Oh, and you notice we're not making any jokes about Cortana because it's not even worth it.
Because who cares?
Right. No. That's punching down so low that it's not even worth it.
Oh.
Sorry, Cortana.
Yeah. Careful, you're going to hear from every single person that ever bought an Invoke speaker.
I'm one of them. You're hearing from me, right?
You're hearing from my lawyers.
I have one too.
I hear you're trying to write a cease and desist to Micah Sargent. Would you like help?
Yes. Oh, God.
Well, that's fun, I guess. I mean, I know Amazon's digital assistant, virtual assistant is trying to make a play in cars as well. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm all about this world in which, as cars become more automated and start to and autonomous, being able to do work in the vehicle on the way to where you're going is sounds like such a great idea.
It does.
In a world where it's safe,
driving.
Of course. Yeah, just not when you're driving. If you're trying to edit a document while you're driving.
That's how I wrote that Windows article. I was actually driving to the gym and I was really upset.
You were in traffic and
the guys in front of me were driving too slow. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, now I'm being shouted at in the notes. It says, let's talk about Windows 7. So let's do that. Woo-hoo. Mary Jo, you've been using Windows 7 and Paul, for some reason, is using Windows 7. Why are we both using Windows 7? What's going on here?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been using Windows 7, and I am still, as we are recording the show today, on the Dell Optiplex All-in-One that I've been using for Windows Weekly and as my desktop PC for almost a decade.
So Mary Jo, you're using that right now, right?
I am.
So I don't know if this is something you could just do like kind of live. Yeah. We might have done this before, but if you can, you should tell us what the specs of this thing are, because if you like open the start menu and right click on computer, go to properties.
Yep.
What do we got? I'm especially curious because you'll have an Intel Core something dash something.
Yep. I have an Intel Core
curious.
i7-3770S.
That is an old computer. That's a third generation. It's got to be a dual core back then. Obviously, it was a long time ago. That is an old computer.
It's a Dell Optiplex 9010. I have 4 gigs of RAM.
What?
I do.
Oh, boy.
It's running Windows 7 Professional. Copyright 2009. Service Pack 1 is on here, luckily. Yep.
Well, yeah.
And so you know what? It's been fine for daily desktop tasks. It's been totally great.
Yeah, but you've no doubt seen.
But how lappable is it?
Yes.
Yeah, this is not that lappable. It's also metal,
it's
not
benchable.
plastic.
It's
as of next week, though, as of the show next week, I will no longer be running this because it will be January 15th, which is the day
after. What do you think's going to happen? You think like Skype's just going to stop working?
Yeah. No, you know what? I'm making that my forcing function for upgrading my desktop to Windows 10.
Okay. You're going to upgrade that computer?
Wait, that's what. Let's follow up on that.
So I'm going to retire this computer.
Yeah, there you go.
And
all right.
I'm switching out to my Surface Laptop 3 with a docking station and a monitor.
What docking station?
Interesting.
I'm thinking of going with a Dell docking station and not the Surface dock because the Dell has more of the ports that I want on it.
Yeah, I've been eyeballing that one too.
Yep.
Wow.
Monitor-wise, I don't know what, though. I'm still kind of going back and forth.
Or dual monitor?
Well, now that you're in the 3.2 world, you, of course, are looking for the thing I've been looking for many years, which is a Surface or third-party 3x2 display.
But there isn't one.
And there isn't one, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a bummer.
Tragic. That would be awesome.
Entirely tragic.
Awesome.
Now, Paul, why are you running Windows 7?
Because I hate myself. And no, you
have to say what you said to me on Skype about Windows 7.
What did I say? What did I say?
You said you couldn't believe how good it still is.
Oh yeah, right. So because Windows 7 it's reaching the end of support next week, I wanted to kind of ride it out into the sunset and kind of remind myself of what that was like.
Go down with the
Unfortunately, most of my experience with Windows 7 over the past month has been me trying to install it on newer computers that I have. Because you got to remember, and I should say I had to remember or be reminded that, as Mary Jo just pointed out, Windows 7 came out in 2009. Yep. All of the modern componentry that is in these computers I have has come out since then. So, for example, USB 3 or M2 SSDs. So I have this Intel NUC, which is one of those small form factor PCs. I actually have 3 of them, but the previous one, I usually use the newest one I have for Windows 10. I'm using the older one. I want to say it's a 5th. Maybe that's the laptop. It could be a 7th generation Intel Core processor. It does have 16 gigs of RAM, M2 SSD. I couldn't get it to install, and I didn't understand why. It was really confusing. Like, setup would come up, the mouse and keyboard would work, and then it wouldn't. And I finally researched it. It's because USB 3. All of the ports on this thing are USB 3. Remember, one of the big complaints in the PC world was, why do PC makers make a computer that has some USB 2 ports and some USB 3 ports? I think it was Windows 7. I think that was why. Because if you didn't have USB 2, you couldn't install it. Anyway, I figured out how to inject USB 3 drivers in the setup, and it's tedious, and you have to use enterprise deployment tools, and you have to do it 3 different times because there's the boot up part, the WinPE rather, the pre-installation environment, and then there's the actual interactive setup. All of those things need support to support USB 3. This took me a long time. Finally figured it out. Most keyboards working. Here we go. And then you get to the part of setup where it says, where do you want to install it? Like, meaning which disk? And it's empty. And I've been using Windows for, ever. I have never seen an empty dialogue of that nature. I have just never seen that. So it was the M2 SSD. So I had to find those drivers, which it's a long story. It doesn't matter anyway. I finally got it installed, but that was tedious. Getting it up to date, super tedious. There is no doubt in my mind, I've said this in the past, and I was reminded of it this past week. Microsoft purposefully left that Windows update in Windows 7 broken to get people to upgrade. I am positive. It is a nightmare to upgrade this thing. But once that's over, everything works. Like it's beautiful looking. It's professional. Doesn't have any of the nonsense in Windows 10. Every app I want to use works fine. I'm doing the podcast on it right now, which would be impressive if Mary Jo hadn't been doing that for the past forever on a 4 megabyte machine or whatever. But
4 megabytes,
4 gigabytes, whatever it is. So it's so amazing to me how old that is. It really works great. Like it works great, and it reminds me of the Mac in a way, and that actually is a compliment, by the way. In the sense that one of the things that people often say about the Mac when they speak about why they prefer it to other systems is they often say it gets out of your way. Like it's kind of a minimalist kind of a system, and you can make it do whatever you want to do. You don't have stuff popping up all over the place like you do in Windows. And Windows 7 is kind of like that, with the exception being that because it's going out of support, you get these occasional pop-ups to remind you that the world's coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And I was amused to discover, and actually a little alarmed, that those pop-ups also occur in Office. And now I'm wondering if next week's going to come and like Microsoft will actually detune Office a little bit. I don't know how that's going to work. So I'm curious. I'm going to we'll use this thing through the end, if you will. I won't use it full time for the next, months or whatever, but I'll use it through the end. We'll see how that goes. And I'm going to keep it on there. And every once in a while, I'm going to bring it back up and just see what that looks like, because there are things like Skype or Office or Microsoft Security Essentials that we know in the case of Security Essentials, they're not just going to turn it off. But at some point, those things have to go away, right? And I'm curious about that. I'm curious to see, because the thing we got to remember is, as of the last time I checked, which was yesterday or the day before, Windows 7 is still installed on over 1/3 of all of the PCs used in the world. Microsoft says that there are 1.5 billion PCs used in the world. That means there are 500 million of these things in use right now. That's a lot. Wow. It's a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that is enterprises, some of whom are buying extended security updates because they're not ready for Windows 10 still.
Yes.
Oh, so you can pay to continue to receive updates.
You can.
Well, we can't as individuals, but businesses can.
Interesting. Yep. I wonder how much money.
But it is. I've seen like 30 numbers around 30+% of people still using Windows 7 at this point, which is free support ends next week, right?
Well, so it's $25 per PC for an enterprise if you qualify the first year. And next year, I think, they double it every year?
Yeah, doubling it.
So next year it will go up to 50 and then 100.
So they're really trying to get you off of it. But
yeah,
of course.
They are.
Yeah. And I whatever it's worth, I mean, this is the conclusion of a 10-year life cycle, 10 years plus really, but let's say 10 years, because that is literally the cycle. When Windows 10 had this event, Windows 10 before Windows 7 was the most popular version of Windows of all time up to that point. Windows 7 is now the most popular version. They extended the lifetime of that system at least twice that I can remember. And I think created a situation where the expectation was, well, they'll keep extending this. I don't have to worry about it. I think this time the one thing they've done correctly is say, look, we're not changing anything. Like, this thing is really going away. Not that has made people leave. So I'm just curious what the experience is going to be like. It'll be like an episode of Beyond and Back.
You're going to keep running it even after security ends and everything.
Yeah. So I will use it through so the end of life is what, the 14th or 15th?
Yeah. Next Tuesday. Patch Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Yeah. So I'll use it at least through the end of next week. And then, like I said, I'm going to leave it installed the way it is. And so every once in a while I'll bring it up and to see what the situation looks like, see what the alarms look like, whatever. But I guess as you pointed out, like I didn't expect this. Like one of the things I've always said about Windows upgrades is you can tell they did it right when you don't want to go back to the other one, right? That's how they did something right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like Windows 8 was such a weird upgrade, and Windows 10, I felt like they fixed the problems with Windows 8. But then you go back and I went back and I used Windows 7. I'm like, geez, I really like this. Like this is the way I want Windows to be.
It's pretty solid. It's pretty solid, you have to say.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, but it's boy.
Oh, by the way, I upgraded my mom over Christmas to Windows 10.
Oh, okay. How'd she like that?
How did that go?
It went very well. Yeah, she's still talking to me.
Good.
Yeah, so I decommissioned her Windows 7 PC, took all her local photos and files off, moved some of the stuff to OneDrive. I set her up on OneDrive. Trying to explain OneDrive to her I'm sure that didn't work. Like I'm going to have to reiterate that a few times what that is and where it is. But yeah, I said to her, do you want to keep the tiled interface or do you want to just have your list of apps? She goes, let's just have both. Okay. And she's been using it and she hasn't called me except once for help so far.
Nice. Okay. Good.
Interesting.
Which could mean many things, but
well, hopefully.
But yeah, she kept saying to me, I don't want to go to Windows 10. That looks so confusing. I don't want that. And then she just took to it. I was like, okay, well, that wasn't that hard.
Good for her. That's awesome.
I know. Yeah.
Now you do have a reminder in the notes here for security essentials, as well as, of course, the last free security update of Windows 7 being on the 14th.
Yeah, next week. In case you haven't heard it a million times already, and if your PC is not domain joined as of the 15th, you may start seeing a full screen pop up from Microsoft saying you're running an unsupported version of Windows.
I know. I can't wait.
You want to see that?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody take their screenshots when that happens.
And then you'll have a checkbox there where you can say, never show me this warning again. You can click that. But if you just click the X, you're going to keep seeing it periodically. So if you are okay with running Windows 7 and you don't want to keep seeing that, make sure you click that little box.
Do you remember when everyone was watching that giraffe that was about to give birth and they told us like 6 days early that the giraffe, it could be today. And so people just
By the way, that's a lot of human births are like that. You go into the hospital and then it's like, seriously, I wasn't trying to make a career out of this. I just wanted to have the kid and get out of here.
I just imagine someone's watching the moment the giraffe gives birth, Windows 7 pops up and says, you're using an unsupported version of Windows. And you get to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just update or click that button,
the weird thing about Windows 7, they supported it for 10 years. And by supported it, I mean they released exactly one service pack and then they stopped thinking about it. But, the thing I think it's unique among Windows versions because it doesn't feel out of date. When XP went off, it went off too late. That it was well past its due date. But most versions of Windows, like after 10 years, you're like, okay, enough of this. Windows 10 is really just Windows 7 with a flatter new UI and the store stuff. I mean, and and telemetry or whatever, but it still feels modern, and I think that's the weird part. And I think that's the psychological issue for people who are still using it because it still works fine.
Okay, and then Chredge, which I always go to the wrong side. I did finally get my Chredge sticker. I got to meet Mary Jo in person, and she had a Chredge sticker for me as she promised. So now it is on Elvis as I promised. Thank you very much for that.
Nice.
It starts rolling out to everyone on January 15th. Now, what is this about being able to run it side by side with the old version of Edge?
So I don't remember the timing of this, but sometime maybe in November, Microsoft had said, or maybe it was December, but they said, look, on this date, I think it's January 20th, Edge is coming out, the new Edge. When it does, the legacy version, the 15th, sorry. So the day after the Windows 7 expiration. When this happens, if you're running Windows 10, you have the old version of Edge, right? So they can't really get rid of the old version of Edge for compatibility reasons. There are a lot of store apps in particular that use the old Edge rendering engine to display stuff in their apps. So they can't just rip it out, but they're hiding it everywhere. So you can't really get to it in the UI anymore. You can't launch it. If you try to launch it, it will launch the new version. And okay, that's fine. And obviously there are certain people who may prefer the old Edge for whatever reason. They like the UI. There's a certain feature that they're not getting in the new version. They might want to run it. But I think the bigger issue is maybe for those enterprises or other businesses that are, for whatever reason, using it. They don't want to retrain people yet on the new version. And so Microsoft is allowing you to run both versions side by side. But there's some hoops you have to jump through to make that happen. And right now, I don't know that anyone has published how you do it on Windows 10 Home, but there's a group policy change you can make on Windows 10 Pro that will enable that. And then for Home, eventually someone will come up with the registry-based fix for that. It will basically do the same thing, allow you to run both versions side by side. So it's just not a reversal of what they said earlier, but basically what they're trying to do is move everyone forward. But for those companies, especially that need to, for whatever reason, run the old version, they still can.
Yep. There's also a blocker toolkit for the new Edge for people who have, especially who if you have a company where you're like, wait, we haven't tested this thing, we're not ready. There are a lot of links out there for the blocker toolkit that you can apply, so you won't get it, because the way Microsoft's going to roll out Chredge, we think, is through Windows Update. And it's not all going to happen on the 15th. It's going to be staggered. So probably on the 15th, I bet they'll let seekers get it, right? And then it'll start rolling out over Windows Update over time to people who are on the various feature updates to Windows 10. It also is going to come to Windows 7 users, even though you're no longer in support the day before. You're still going to get Chredge, the final version of Chredge.
So that, by the way, that raises another side-by-side issue, because if you are currently running a pre-released version of Edge, right? Remember there are three channels?
Yeah.
Dev,
Canary, Beta,
and Beta. This release version will be a fourth channel, if you will. These things can all be installed side by side. So if you're running, say, the beta version of Edge today on whatever system, I don't think it matters. When the final version comes out, if you install that, it doesn't overwrite the beta version. It's installed side by side. And the issue there is, if you install sync, you're going to get most stuff in both versions because they'll sync simultaneously. The problem is the initial shipping version of Edge is not feature complete. So one of the things that it doesn't sync is extensions. So if you went to the time and effort of manually installing whatever extensions it is that you like to use in the beta version of Edge, you're going to have to do that again manually in the release version.
Gotcha. Okay, it's Xbox time. There should be a jingle here, for the Xbox. But let's see. There's more about Xbox One, Series X, or is it 10? I'll never tell. Starts with pricing.
X. It is X, right? Yeah, it is X.
Yeah.
This is the refrigerator-looking Xbox.
Interesting. Yeah. What do you call it? So I've been trying to figure out what the term is. It's kind of what it is a cube that has been stretched out to a rectangle. But what do you call that shape?
Rectangular
like it's a
prism, isn't it?
Is it? Okay, maybe. I was expecting to say, yeah, that's it. What?
What is that thing at the beginning of 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Well, see, that's not what it. That's a slab because it's. Yeah, but that's not. It's essentially flat. Like it doesn't have depth.
Okay.
So in other words, the base of this thing is a square.
Yeah, a rectangular.
But the sides are all rectangles.
Mm-hmm. That would be.
So I don't know what you call that. It's like a squared off cylinder.
Yeah, the closest thing is a rectangular prism. You could also call it a cuboid.
Oh, cuboid.
Cuboid?
Yeah.
Okay. So there is no good term for it. That's good. I was thinking I was losing my mind, but it looks a little bit like a mini tower PC to me.
Yeah.
Especially if you look at the ports in the back. It's got that kind of, it looks like a.
Sorry, somebody in the chat said a square tube.
Square tube.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's weird, right? That we don't have a good word for that. The French and Germans probably have awesome words for those things.
Yeah,
anyway,
in German they do, for sure.
Yeah, the Schadencube. This is the Schadencube or whatever.
Schadencube.
Anyway.
Okay, how much does this thing cost? Woof.
Well, we don't know. It's except that it will be a lot of zeros. Okay. So if you think about how the Xbox One X Xbox One, the original one, came into the market, very expensive, north of $500. And then you look at the pricing of consoles today, you can get a normal Xbox One S probably for $200, an off sale. And then I think Xbox One X is probably $299, $300. It's reasonable to expect this thing to be at least $500 and probably more. There'll be two versions of it. I don't know if they'll both be available at launch, but there'll be a lower end version as well. They'll be less expensive, but I think that's how it's going to go. When you look at how the S to the X to the Series S and then eventually Series X goes, I think it's going to be kind of a clean sweep upwards. So just expect it to be expensive, especially this first year.
Okay.
Although they've not said, but they're not using bargain basement parts this time.
That makes sense. And this is going to be, I mean, what is this? Are we basically looking at a gaming PC in Xbox form?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's got great ports and next gen GPUs, CPUs, and TPKs.
All that stuff.
All that.
Cuboids.
All that good stuff. All the cuboids, yes. Now here is a serious question as opposed to the ridiculous ones. Who, in a world where we have, Microsoft's take on subscription gaming that's in the cloud, and Google is doing a horrible job working on their own right now.
God
and
love
other
them.
ones. God, yeah, exactly. Bless their hearts. What can we expect? Like, why get this device if I'm already looking at a future with any device?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of gaming in my tip, but this is a little bit, honestly, it kind of tracks to the Windows conversation we had at the top of the show. You see a future, and you're going to get there, but you have to address the present as well. Mm-hmm. And there is a large audience of people who have bought Xboxes over the years, whether they're 360s or Xbox Ones, that will want to upgrade in this time frame, and they just either can't or won't or don't want to go to game streaming. It's just not there yet. So Microsoft has not ever said it this way, but every time now that a new console comes out, you have to kind of wonder, is this going to be the end of the line for this kind of thing? And the answer is probably no. But actually, maybe Office is a better example. They move Office to the cloud with Office 365. They still kind of come out with this limited Office 2019 product that they don't really want people to buy. Xbox isn't quite there yet, but if there is a future Xbox after the Xbox Series X, maybe that'll be that version. Maybe that'll be the one. Like, well, we're doing this because we know people have discs and they want a place to plug them in, and whatever, we have to serve that market. We don't want to abandon people, but both Sony and Microsoft are basically doing the same thing. They're extending their current family of video game consoles with a new generation that are super powerful, 4K, 60 frames a second, whatever. It's still going to be better. I mean, I don't, as far as what the market is, I mean, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, obviously there's a pretty big market of people who play games on PCs. There's a big market of people who play games on consoles. There's a humongous market of people who just play games casually on whatever, phones, whatever they are. And consoles are kind of weird because they're in the middle. You have to really want a game to buy a console, tell you. I mean, but it's less expensive than buying a good gaming PC and less complicated. And so that market exists, and I think they're just trying to serve it. But I do look at it as kind of being something that's winding down, that not necessarily, again, that this is the last one, but I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel,
Gotcha.
for dedicated consoles.
Gotcha. And then there's some games with Xbox Live Gold. Is this so they don't normally reveal these games, or they do?
No, they do. So the point of that is just that every month comes around, and Microsoft, now they have multiple programs, but for people who are Xbox Live Gold members, which is what you need to do multiplayer gaming and so forth on Xbox, they give away 4 free games every month. And so at the beginning of every month, you can say, well, here are the games. This month's games, let me just bring this up real quick before I completely destroy it. But yeah, I mean, nothing. No, the Telltale Batman games are pretty great. And that will be available. Yeah, the second half of the month looks a little more interesting than the first half. Let's put it that way. But if you're on Xbox Live Gold, which most Xbox gamers are, this stuff is all free. And then there's also some Xbox Game Pass stuff that I'll talk about in the tip, because this is something that happens as well. This is the halfway point between this old system, Xbox Live Gold, and then the future, which is xCloud, gotcha. Where it's an all-in kind of consumer subscription service.
Gotcha. Well, I think then, unless you have anything else you want to say about ports and AMD and all that jazz, what happened there?
There are a lot of ports. Well, so I guess AMD did a presentation at CES where they came out and they said, here's a picture of the back of the Xbox One, and it was something they had downloaded from the internet that was from a third party that they didn't even get from Microsoft. It was completely incorrect. So it's like, no, that's not it. But thanks for being a great partner there, buddy.
That's so bad.
So, yeah.
But have they corrected it, or has someone else corrected them that there was?
Actually, Brad corrected it. He got a leaked image of the actual rear of the device and posted about it this week.
Excellent. So go check that out for sure on therot.com. All right. Well, speaking of, you've been teasing us with your tip of the week. So let's hear it.
Yeah. So one of the big changes that we're right in the middle of in the video game space is that thing we were just talking about. So if you're an Xbox gamer, that historically has meant that you've played games on a console. That's what Microsoft has done. They put out 3 major generations of consoles. For the Xbox One, they've actually released 3 different versions of that console, and they each have had additional features. It's been kind of a nice progression. And then through their backward compatibility program, they brought forward many games from the original Xbox and from Xbox 360 so that they run on the Xbox One series of devices. So it's been kind of a nice continuum there. But we're moving into this era of kind of heterogeneous gaming. And so the steps you take to get to that era are you move Xbox to more of a kind of a cloud-based system. And you also move Xbox so that it works on other devices. And so there's an Xbox Game Pass where you can subscribe for whatever, $10 a month, and you get some selection of 100 plus games you can play on the console. But now they have a version for the PC as well. And because the PC games and the Xbox games often work on both device types, you can get an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, and that gives you the ability to play those games on both device types. And this is the transition we're making. So, when the next Xbox comes out, there's going to be some percentage of the population, the user base on Xbox that wants to move forward to the new console. I'm kind of excited to do that, frankly. I do. That's how I play games. I play games on the console, and I don't care about playing games on a phone or out on the TV or whatever. Like, to me, I just use an Xbox. But this is how they're going to reach this kind of broader audience. And so xCloud is happening. xCloud is the pure cloud services, cloud service version of Xbox. We don't know yet what the full collection will be, but based on the fact that it's basically a bunch of Xboxes in a data center, which is kind of crazy. It could be most of the games that are available for Xbox One today will run on xCloud rather. That's kind of exciting, but that's going to happen later in the year. So if you want a taste of this future, you could look at some of the versions of Game Pass that exist today on console, on PC, or on both. I've been using the Ultimate version, although frankly, I don't actually game on PC all that much at all still, but I keep trying. I'll get there maybe, but this is the tip. The tip is basically to sort of, this is, in the New Year's resolution kind of sense where we kind of reevaluate everything in January for whatever reason, arbitrarily in some ways. We're kind of teetering on the edge of the new stuff. So we've got the old way we've always done things. Microsoft is transitioning us. They have these interim services, and then we're going to move forward to this new stuff later this year. And I think that if you haven't done it, you get all the benefits of Xbox Live Gold. But if you join Game Pass, you can at least experience, even though you're not streaming them, right? You still have to download the games, but you have this notion of a cloud-based collection of games that you get as part of the subscription. And for $10 a month or whatever, instead of paying $6 a month and just getting access to online, to Xbox Live Gold and then having to buy games at $60 a piece, you get access to this giant collection. And you can kind of think of it as like Netflix or Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, but for gaming. So this is the way you can kind of experience that stuff today. I think it's good enough that you should at least look at it if you're into Xbox, because this is, this market's going to change. And I think it's going to change pretty quickly this coming year and beyond.
That should be interesting to watch.
Yeah, interesting times.
And now there's an update for the Windows Weekly giveaways.
Oh, right. Yeah. So Chris Capicella was on the show, as he has been for the past few years, the last episode of the year, right before Christmas. And as he's done for the past couple of years as well, he gave out a bunch of Xbox, actually Game Pass Ultimate and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate and Office 365 Home product keys, 10 each. And then he gave away a bunch of great Surface hardware too. So there were 2 Surface Pro X's, 2 Surface Pro 7s, and 2 Surface Laptop 3s.
Cool.
So I had, I kind of did this a year ago. Because of the way I am, I think I made it more work than it needed to be. So this year I was like, I'm going to do this more efficiently. So I did the giveaway through my site. I have heard from everybody except for one. So there's one winner out there I haven't heard from. I'm going to contact him for the 3rd time. And if I don't hear back, I'll just give his product key to someone else. But basically, everyone has heard from me. The devices have shipped. Like, it's all happened. So in the time between the last episode of the show and this one, I have almost completely wiped my hands of this. Like I said, I have one more guy to get to, but I don't know if it's caught in spam filter or whatever it is. But
check your junk folders, everyone. It's
real.
But
we had thousands and thousands of responses. It was pretty great.
Oh wow,
so,
really?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, if you go look at those posts, it's like.
Now, were one of the 2 Surface laptops that were given away? Was there a blue one?
No, it's kind of hard to tell from the box. Like they're all they're new or whatever, obviously. So from the outside, it didn't say anywhere what the color was, but it looked like it might have just been the normal. What's the normal color, like platinum or something? Or
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just the basic, whatever the basic color was.
Yeah, I can't remember what that one is either. Just
I don't even know. I don't even know if it had like Alcantara on it. Like, I literally have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, tweet at us or tweet at me at the very least. I want to see your Surface Laptop 3s.
Yeah, I only heard from one of these guys yet, and he's like, "Yeah, I had some problems with it rebooting and stuff." I'm like, "Dude, I'm not going to customer service this thing. I'm just the conduit.
You give it away. Talk to Clippy. Clippy will take care of you.
Yeah." It's just like, it looks like you're looking for help, and you've come to the wrong place.
Not here.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, what's your app pick of the week?
Yeah. So late last year, I had written this thing about using like a non-Chrome web browser, and I had kind of listed through some of the big choices. Obviously, in the Microsoft space, we're very interested in the new Microsoft Edge. I strongly recommend, even though it's really only for technical people at this point, a browser like Brave, perhaps, or Opera. These are things that are all Chromium-based browsers that kind of exclude all the Google stuff. But I had forgotten about one, and there's another one of these kind of browsers that's based on Chromium called Vivaldi, and I have actually used it in the past. And it's, I believe this one is most notable because they have like a crazy amount of customization you can do to the user interface. So it's basically everything you get with Chrome plus this customization functionality. But they came up with a new version. Doesn't sound like a big deal. Like, it's 2.10. It's like, what's the big deal here? But Vivaldi has run into something that I think all of the Chromium-based browsers either are already running into or will run into, which is this. Google is starting to sense on their own services and sites that this is not Chrome, and you're getting that terrible pop-up that says, oh, you should use Chrome. Remember, like, if you use the old Edge, you would get that. And the reason is it's just doing a check of the browser. I forgot the name of the browser signature. Like, it says Mozilla, whatever it is. And Vivaldi, and Microsoft Edge does this today, identifies itself as itself. And you get all these incompatibility issues on Google Docs, on Google.com, or whatever it is. And so they looked into this, and they were like, if we just change this so it looks like the same thing as Chrome, everything just works. Like, Google stops bugging you about this stuff, and and the features that didn't work before work fine. So they decided to change their browser string, and they're just spoofing Chrome, and now everything works great.
Wow.
This is something Microsoft is probably going to have to do or deal with in some way as well. I have heard from people who say they go to Google sites and get that pop-up using the new Edge. Actually, let me check it here, because I don't see that, but
I know I've heard people say that too, and I think I've seen it once somewhere, but I don't see it all the time.
I don't know that I've seen it. I'm not seeing it right now, so I don't know. But obviously Google has the capability to examine the browser that's coming to their site and determine that it's not actually Chrome, and then throw up their advertising because they want you to use Chrome. So the new version of Vivaldi, they have worked around that, let's say. So if that is an issue for you, it's something you could take a look at.
Nice. All right. Well, I was also checking to see if it was going to give me that pop-up. Let's move on to our enterprise pick of the week.
Right. So we've endlessly talked about end of life of Windows 7 is next week on January 14th. The other products that go out of support next week on January 14th are SQL Server 2008, SQL Server 2008 R2. A lot of businesses are still using these products. I don't have an actual number, like we have a rough estimate with Windows 7, but I talked to many, many companies still running these. So there is a way that Microsoft announced over a year ago that you can continue to get security updates for these two products without paying. And the catch is you have to move your workloads to Azure. But for some people, that's a viable choice, or at least a possible choice. So if you are one of those people, you should check out Microsoft's website. They have a lot of different places where they advertise how to do this, but you can actually go to Azure, move your workloads, and migrate them over to Azure. You don't have to prove in any way that you have a plan to move off of Server 2008 R2 or Server 2008. You just do this and boom, for 3 years, you get free security updates with no catches. Like you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to do any kind of contract with Microsoft. You just get these. So if you're one of those companies, that might be an option for you if you are panicking about the end of support for your server next week.
All right, there you go. We've got 3 code names this week. What are the code name picks of the week? So given Chredge starts rolling out next week to the mainstream, I thought it would be fun to do some browser code names. So I don't know how many people remember this, but Chredge's code name is Anaheim. The code name for the original Edge, Legacy Edge, or whatever you want to call it, was Spartan. Oh, that means we call it Ledge. Legacy Edge. Ledge and Chredge.
Good old Ledge. And then for bonus points, I went back and looked up the code name for IE, Internet Explorer 1. I had forgotten the code name. It was O'Hare.
O'Hare.
You know
because,
why? Very
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Let's see if Micah can guess. Do you know why it might be O'Hare?
I think it's O'Hare because the development team that was working on IE1, they submitted the last code base while they were sitting at the O'Hare airport.
No.
It's tied to the code name for Windows 95.
That's creative.
No, it's not.
No, he had the Chicago connection correct, right?
Thank you, Mary Jo. Paul was just like, "No, you're wrong. You're very wrong.
No, you're wrong. That's not it.
That's a terrible answer."
So what?
You were voted off
Windows
the island.
95. Windows 95 was codenamed Chicago.
Okay.
IE1 shipped in Chicago, and that was why it was called O'Hare.
Oh, and also because that your internet browser is your way to sort of launch out and travel. To fly on the web. Yeah. Cool. I wonder if there's a spider that's native to Chicago that would have worked as a better code name.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to beer because that is a rescue for all of us.
It is. So I went back and tasted a beer that was one of my very first Imperial Stouts recently. The name of it is Evil Twins Even More Jesus.
Even More Jesus, okay.
The reason it's called
Even More Jesus.
Now with Even More Jesus. No, the reason they called it that, I went back and looked. Here's their opening line on their website. A few times in the history of craft beer, it has happened that a highly praised beer rises beyond mortal stardom into higher godly league.
Yikes.
So if you've ever had this beer,
blasphemous.
If you've ever had this beer, it's 12%. It was brewed by Evil Twin, which was a Danish brewery, but it was brewed in South Carolina for them because they didn't have their own brewery at the time it initially came out. And if you taste imperial stouts now, they're typically really sweet. They call them pastry stouts many times because they taste like dessert. Evil Twin does not. Even More Jesus does not really taste like that. It actually has chocolatey flavors and you can taste some brown sugar, but it also has this weird, and I hate using these words for drinks, leathery quality to it, like smoky, leathery.
Oh,
and it keeps it from being really sweet. Instead, it just gives you this really awesome, smoky, dark, stout taste that is fantastic. And I forgot how good a beer this is, but if you find it, there are also a lot of different variants. There's chili and there's one with a cherry flavor to it. But the original, Even More Jesus, I would say, is the one you should go to for your godly experience of an imperial stout.
Okay, so man. I'm seeing Evil Twin available at my local. Oh yeah, Almas.
They're around, right?
Jesus, or is that French? On Pilgrim? Yeah, I see it, but it's they have a lot of variants. That may be one of the special variants. Oh.
They have a Pappy Van Winkle aged one. They have lots of different ones. So any of them are great, but that one just the original one is really great too. If you see it around, just remember it's 12%.
I'm a fool. I was literally looking this up to see if I can't drink most beers.
I know you can't drink this. Can you?
I'm so sad. Yeah, I was really looking that up like, ooh, I can't, because I really like stouts, as I mentioned, but yeah. They often are so sweet. And so to have
you could
one
just
that wasn't,
smell it.
Yeah, I'll just crack it open and smell. I'll have someone else taste it, and they can sort of.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can live vicariously
maybe
through them.
Ant likes beer.
Yeah, when he gets back from CES, I'll say, here, try these.
Yeah.
We need to do like a beer version of Sideways, where it ends with you like dumping like an urn of beer on yourself.
Yeah. And then running through a field.
Right. Are you chewing gum?
Well, with that chewing gum comment, we have reached the end of another episode of Windows Weekly. Mary Jo Foley of All About Microsoft, thank you so much for entertaining and educating us today.
Thank you. And thanks for, reminding people how much I hate consumers.
Anytime, all the time. Right. Always for you. Paul Thurrott.
I just hate products, but she hates people.
You just hate people. Let's just admit that.
I just hate all people. Yeah, that's true.
Exactly.
Well, Paul Thurrott of Thurrott.com, I think that is just a fake exterior to your warm and cozy.
An affectation to my warm nougaty center.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Just like a good stout. I think that is the case. Thank you so much for your entertainment and education this week.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming back.
Yes.
Always happy to be here with you.
Yeah, we'll never be able to explain that, but we appreciate it.
This show, of course, records live every Wednesday at about 2 p.m. Eastern. That's 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 1900 UTC. If you head to twit.tv/WW, that will show you a site where you can click on all the different ways to subscribe to the show, which is a great thing to do so that no matter what time we're on and no matter who's hosting the show, be it Clippy or Leo or myself, it's always available for you right there in your pod. I'm not going to say it. I don't say podcatcher because I think that's a horrific word. In your podcast app or service of choice. You can find it there. Windows Weekly will be back next week with more. Until then,
we're doing this every week now? What the heck?
Surprise! Until then, we say goodbye.